Another escalation today as Iran-backed Houthi forces in Yemen claim responsibility for an attack on a U.S. cargo ship in the Red Sea. Houthi forces have been targeting key international shipping routes in the Red Sea, getting advanced military weapons from Iran. Last week, U.S. and British forces, with help from Canada and other allies, launched a series of retaliatory strikes on Houthi targets in Yemen. U.S. Central Command today announcing the strike on social media, saying there were no reported injuries or serious damage to the vessel. To understand the escalating conflict and its impact, we're joined now by retired Vice-Admiral Mark Norman, the former head of the Canadian Navy. Hi, Admiral Norman. Pleasure to see you. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you, Vassy. I'm glad to help. Hopefully I can help.
I want to just, I'm sure you can. I wanted to start off and just ask by this latest strike, which did follow, comes like a day after the Houthis attacked a U.S. Navy destroyer. Does that tell you that the strikes late last week ultimately are not going to deter the Houthis from the Red Sea?
Well, I mean, they themselves had stated that they would retaliate, and this is consistent with their own rhetoric. And so, you know, and the Western forces, the U.S.-led forces, have a bit of a challenge on their hands because, you know, there's a limit to how much they can continue to attack the Houthi facilities and installations, and plus the fact that a lot of these are mobile and they'll be very hard to get.
Yeah, my understanding is what I had read this morning was that the U.S. destroyed in total about 30 Houthi sites. U.S. officials have acknowledged, though, that the Houthis still have about 3/4 of their ability to fire missiles and drones at ships making voyages through the Red Sea. What is it about the Red Sea that they want to be able to have an impact on?
Yeah, well, I'll give you three quick answers. The first one is that geographically, you know, this is the entrance or exit to the Suez Canal in the southern part of the canal. And your viewers may remember a year or so ago that we had a ship stuck in the canal, and that caused mayhem economically. And that's what's happening now. So they're having an asymmetric impact from what is a relatively you know, immature and disorganized force, if I can put it that way. They're having an impact on the global economy. That's the first thing. The second thing is that this is, in essence, adjacent, a spillover, if you will, from the Israel-Gaza conflict. And the Houthis have clearly stated their support to Hamas and Hezbollah and other militant forces in the region. And so that's giving them an opportunity to, if you will, to, you know, further that cause and that narrative. And the third objective here, and the reason why this matters, is they're giving the Americans a bit of a hard time, and that plays well with their own domestic audience, but it also plays well with the allies and Axis, led by Iran and others, who are looking to both embarrass but ultimately destabilize the United States and the region. So that this is pretty serious.
How would you assess Iran's response, in particular, to what's unfolding in the Red Sea? I've read some commentary that it could have gone much further, or it still could go much further, but there might be a bit of reticence on Iran's part. I'm not sure if you agree with that assessment.
Yeah, well, I don't know the precise assessment, but my instinct tells me that they're playing their cards pretty close to their chest. They have options and they have maneuver space. And, you know, at the moment, they're not denying any links to this. They've picked a side in the Israel-Hamas conflict. We know they are not friends of Israel. And I think they're watching the Americans very, very carefully. And I think they'll be watching in particular how the Americans respond. You know, this was an American ship that was struck. Will that cause an escalation on the American side? And, you know, Iran's got options, and I think they're being fairly strategic, as they tend to be, and they act primarily through proxies without showing those cards that I mentioned earlier.
The Canadian government on Friday, after news of this came out, did say we were part of kind of the allied, the coalition of countries that were involved in this, obviously led by the U.S. and the U.K., but we were involved in, quote, the planning stages of the strikes ultimately on the Houthis in Yemen. In layman's terms, can you translate that for us? What resources would have been involved in the planning and how so?
Yeah, so I don't know precisely, but what I can say is that Canada has, as I believe I understand, roughly half a dozen staff officers embedded in the U.S. led naval staff under the command of U.S. Fifth Fleet, which is subordinate to U.S. CENTCOM. So it's a bit of a complex organization, but ultimately, this is a very large operational staff that would have been intimately involved with the planning of those attacks, although obviously we would not have been directly involved in any of the actual kinetics or the potentially even the targeting. But ultimately, we have a few staff officers there. They would have been very busy. The entire organization would have been very busy. And I don't know at this point how involved they were. I think, to be honest, we're being a bit generous in our official description of our involvement, but nonetheless, it helps that Canada at least is on board and publicly supporting the actions of the U.S. and the United Kingdom up to this point.
Yeah, I just have a few seconds left, but I'd conclude on that. Your thoughts on sort of the significance of Canada, being a part of the list of countries at least in support of the U.S. actions in Yemen.
Yeah, and I think that's about as far as we should honestly take it. And to be honest, there's others who are carrying the load here, and at least we're there. But I wouldn't put a lot of stock in the extent to which we're actively participating in this activity.
Okay, Admiral Norman, I'll leave it there. Pleasure as always to have you on our program. Thank you.